Imagine this: US jets screaming over Nigerian skies, boots on the ground, guns are blazing, as Trump himself put it, all to protect Christians from jihadists or the Boko Haram. Sounds heroic, right? But what if I tell you it's a small screen? A brutal power play for African hidden treasure: gold, uranium, rare earth materials worth trillions of US dollars. And France? They're pulling the strings from the shadow. This is not protection, this is a plunder. Welcome to the real war, the war of the controlling Sahel. Buckle up because the truth will shake your world. Hit that like button if you're ready to uncover the empire dirty secrets, and subscribe because this rabbit hole goes deeper. Let's roll.
Trump threatening military intervention of Nigeria is really about access to Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, the Alliance of Sahel States. This is going to be an intervention on behalf of France. Ever since Niger nationalized its uranium assets, the same uranium that France was using, stealing to run its nuclear reactors to make itself a nuclear power, a superpower, Niger is asserting its own sovereignty over its natural resources, same as Burkina Faso, same as Mali with its gold. Burkina Faso with its gold and other resources. So this is making NATO very nervous. Countries like Ivory Coast have expelled French troops from their country, Chad as well. Also, Senegal as well kicked out French troops. Remember, West Africa is where France gets all of its power from. Without total domination, subjugation, and sabotage of West African states, France has absolutely no power. It is toothless. Right now, 14 West and Central African countries use something called the CFA franc. It is a currency that is backed, that is attached to the French franc at first, and now the euro. These 14 countries are required to pay half of their foreign exchange reserves paid back into the French treasury. And if these countries say no, also remember that Abuja in Nigeria is the seat of ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. This is a regional economic bloc that seeks to put all of these West African states under the control of the African Union and, by extension, the European Union. That is why you will find that the people of Nigeria are the very last to benefit from the resources of Nigeria because of economic blocs that do not favor the prosperity of African people like ECOWAS. And so Bola Tinubu, the president of Nigeria, is very disgruntled that the Alliance of Sahel States of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso want to exit ECOWAS, have actually exited from ECOWAS. They do not want to be under the yoke of imperialism any longer. So this is all about France losing its grip and viability as a world superpower. So America wants to intervene on its behalf.
On 31st, when people were celebrating Halloween, Trump turned everything in the White House to a Nigeria show off. So Trump labeled Nigeria as a country of particular concern for religious freedom. The next day, boom, he went live on TV, telling they had ordered Pentagon to prep for strike or prep from airstrike, whatever it takes to protect Christians. We don't refute that. Then came the Nigerian president, Mr. Tinubu, who fires back, call it misinformation. And the right groups, activists, came to spotlight, which beg for talks, but not the bomb.
The claim that many Christians are dying in Nigeria and it's a genocide attack against Christians is misleading.
U.S. President Donald Trump has repeated his allegations of massacres against Christians in Nigeria and threatened with military action.
They're killing the Christians and killing them in very large numbers. We're not going to allow that to happen.
The Nigerian government has flat out rejected these claims, but admitted having a security problem. In a de-escalating tone, they said they are focused on finding solutions and view the U.S. as a helpful partner.
The report or notion that there is a Christian persecution or genocide in Nigeria is false. False both from the premise and the conclusion. It is not supported by data.
So what's going on? Who's telling the truth about Nigeria's Christians? And why is this being debated now? Our colleague Olisa Chukwama in Lagos has some answers.
Nigeria is a half-Christian, half-Muslim nation that has been grappling with an insecurity crisis for more than a decade. It's a complex mix of terrorism, banditry, kidnapping and criminality. In the country's north-central region, Christians are among those killed in farmer-herder communal violence, with layers of both ethnic and religious undertones. Churches have also been targeted in the past, and in the north, Islamist groups are waging a deadly insurgency.
The Christians in the northern part that are affected by these insurgencies are minorities. Data is saying that there are 9 Muslims to 1 Christian who are affected by this insurgency. We discovered that more Muslims are even attacked, more Muslims are displaced, more Muslims are killed than Christians just because of the location they're in.
So where do these narratives come from? Analysts point towards right-wing linked Christian advocacy groups from the US and locally that often cite unverified data about violence in religiously diverse countries like Nigeria.
One of the things we discovered is that many of these advocacy groups, they push out these numbers without proper finding in an attempt to push for a policy. That's first. Also another attempt to generate funds and revenue. So the main reason they push out these massive numbers is to strike an emotional chord.
Rights groups accuse the government of failing to protect people from attacks that have killed thousands. And analysts warn that false narratives about Christians being targeted will only hinder efforts to get to grips with the crisis.
And the problem with this claim is that it is pushing a narrative that will mislead actions that may help mitigate other sorts of insecurity and insurgency happening in Nigeria.
Now, what's the Trump move? It's straight out of his first playbook. Evangelical fire to rally the base. Convert people to beg, to kneel for you by fire, whether they like it or not. But peel back that rhetoric. And what do you find? It's not about crosses and players. It's about cash. Cold, hard, glittering cash, which is buried under African sand. So Trump has been preaching American first, and whatever he's trying to think of, or whatever he's thinking of doing to Africa, it leaves many more questions than answers, because whatever is happening needs to be studied. So now, something in the playbook, it's Sahel, the African heartbeat of rebellion, the African states where the military don't tolerate nonsense. It's a belt which is choked with dust from Senegal to Sudan, which is erupting. So imagine in 2023 to 2024, the juntas in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, they said enough is enough. Then they form an alliance, which they name it Alliance of Sahel States, or AES. They thought no more ECOWAS puppet, which they were dancing to France tune. They kicked out French troops from operation in Burkina Faso or the region around, with the so-called mentality that anti-terrorism, or they are on anti-terror mission, which their main idea or their main agenda was to funnel uranium and gold from Africa to Paris. And by it was mid-2024, the game was over for these colonizers. Imagine percent of Niger's uranium mines is what fuel France's nuclear powers, right? Those US drones, bases.
Is Trump really trying to play in our faces with this strategic messaging about Nigeria? So he just called Nigeria a country of particular concern because, in his words, Christians are being slaughtered. And he is talking about the 3,100 Christians who've sadly been killed, right? But we need to slow that right down, because when you use faith like that and you ignore the Muslims dying too, It starts to feel like their lives don't count. And more than that, it hides what's actually driving the violence, because do you really think that this is about religion? Anyway, I need you guys to stick with me so you can see what's actually going on here, right? It's the same conflict, same killers, and this isn't new. It's chaos that's been brewing for years. Armed groups, gunmen, rogue herders, all moving through gaps that the governments have failed to fill, right? Isn't this the same play that we've seen in Haiti, Sudan, DRC? Convenient? Break the state, then swoop in with a savior story. Why now? Why Nigeria? Well, here's what they're not saying, right? Nigeria's got $40 billion in oil exports, some of the largest gas reserves in Africa, solid minerals, gold, lithium, tin, resources that maybe the US needs, especially in a Cold War with China. And it's not just what's underground, is it? It's the land. The middle belt grows the food that feeds the nation, fertile, rain-fed, high yield. And guess where the most violence hits? Right there. And I need to clarify, right? People aren't being killed just because they're Christian. They're being killed because they're in the way. And many of them happen to be Christian because that's what it dominates that area, right? So this isn't just about faith. It's about land control, food and power. That same zone full of ginger farms, mineral-rich soil, and foreign players are circling. The Gates Foundation invested in smallholder farming, agri-tech, yield targets. This is not a conspiracy, right? This is public record. But when the West enters through aid, it rarely ever stops at support. And some will say that these killers don't move alone, right? They're backed, tolerated, or armed by whoever's buying access. Local counterparts, foreign deals, the highest bidder. So when you hear Christian persecution, ask what's really at stake and how close the nearest air path is, right? Because China's already in, right? Ports, refineries, defense deals, ammunition factories. And now Trump wants Congress to get involved. That's not just concern. That's positioning. Because when America talks about saving Christians overseas, come on, man, is this really about faith? It looks like it might be a green light. It moves money, activates voters, justifies presence. And while that's happening, he's also saying, you know what? Maybe we should save Nigeria's best talent and make them come over and move to America. So which is it? Are you worried about the people dying? Or are you more concerned about scouting the ones who survive? That's not rescue, that's resource control. So what's the play? If I'm Nigeria, I tighten internal defense, limit foreign boots. If I'm a citizen, start asking who's funding the next rescue mission. This isn't about God, is it? What is it about? Nigeria's rise, the deals, the land, the leverage. Have they made it too powerful to ignore? Anyway, let's talk.
The Niger's uranium accounts to 30% of France's nuclear fuel. So basically France is powered by what? Niger's uraniums. Those US drones, which they think they are handing back to Africa like trash, they're what? They are made from African raw materials. Now, let's talk about Russia. Russia has been one of the friends of Africa, pure business. When it comes to Africa, or when it comes to two countries that value Africa mostly, it's China and what? And Russia. They come for pure business. Their relationship with African countries is pure transactional. But the countries like France, these colonizers actually, their main agenda is different. So let's dig in. So Russian troops swoop in sometimes back. The Wagner group, they are now called African Corps, which they traded this AK-47 for gold. 2 billion a year of gold or rare earth materials are flown to Moscow. Then the Alliance of Sahel region troop reclaimed their land, shouting, "We need our independence, but not your recolonization." Now, the bullseye, the gold. Oh, the gold. No, 20% of the world reserve. The gold is 20% of the world reserve, plus rare earth materials for your iPhone and Tesla come from Africa. France once hogged it all through the CFA, which France come, laundering African shines through their banks. That's why these guys are still sweeping in, poking their nose in African business. But now, This the Alliance of Sahel region ships to BRICS and its brothers. The Western access has been slashed to 40%. Then the France gold imports, it's down to 20% in 2024, went down to 20% in 2024. And you saw the result. I think France was declared bankrupt sometimes back this year, I think. The parliament cannot function. The government cannot pay for its civil servants. Because what? The money, the easy gold reserves that they are used to, squander, or they are used to grab and go pay, the source has been cut. The hands that feed the mouth has been cut. And you saw what the effect. So basically, Paris was bleeding and is still bleeding economically, existentially. Their empire now, it's like in life support, and Africa is the one in charge of electricity or pulling the plug. So Africa controls the remote. Imagine, empires don't die quietly. France is not living, it's lighting fires. It's outsourcing terror to jihadist proxies. Declassified documents scream it. French intel is aiming at Al-Qaeda, Jenim, through Libya black markets. Why? Their main reason is to choke the Alliance of African Sahel, to keep gold roads bloody and broken. Imagine, look at what's happening in the northwest of Nigeria, which is about 1,500 kilometer border with Niger. So there are bandits like, Kachal Mati, Gold Kings, which they are making about 300 million naira a week, trading for guns from Sahel shadows. Nigeria is bleeding $9 billion yearly to illegal digs. 60% funds Boko Haram and ISWAP. The very monster Trump claim he'll bomb. Now, from what I've gathered, there are a lot of American corporations in Nigeria, right? And these corporations have been in existence way before, like 20 years back in time. These corporations, they have been digging, they have been getting their soup, their top layer from what? From those mines in northern Nigeria. Now, all these Boko Haram, they're threatening the supply. They're threatening the hands that supply, the hands that give, these minerals. I've heard that US is constructing a very big embassy in Nigeria. What do you think it's the motive behind it? Okay, let's assume it's not USA. Let's go to France. So France were chased out, right? And you've seen many a times when these France have tried to destabilize African countries. Do you remember those instances? Do you remember how many times there were been assassination attempts for junta leaders like our Traore? How have you heard how many times they've been attempt to end his life? Last time you had the General Langley, that is the American commander in Africa, accuse Ibrahim Traore of actually benefiting from this, what you call gold for himself, mining gold for himself, hoarding gold for himself. And what happened? People, talked about it. People were against the whole idea. So I guess you're getting my point. or what I'm trying to imply. Nigeria bleeds $9 billion yearly to illegal gangs. 60% funds Boko Haram and ISWAP, the very monster Trump claims he will bomb. And you can see, when you look very clearly, you can see French fingerprints everywhere. Smuggling south to Benin and smuggling south to Togo. They are feeding Paris gold addiction, because addiction is one thing that these guys they'll never deal with it. So now Burkina Faso captain Ibrahim Traore said it plain and simple: we're not fighting terrorism, we're fighting for independence. And they are burning it down. They are burning our independence down. And what Trump said is in bed with it. US recalibrates arm deals, drones, worth millions for Nigeria in August 2025. This was a bait base for occupation for another Libya. You remember what happened with Libya during the Obama time? These guys wanted to work together, but it was an avenue to get to where? To get to Muammar Gaddafi. So it's the same CIA ghost, but with the different decades.
Please understand that anytime Trump says that he is protecting Christianity, what that is really code for is he's protecting white supremacy. That's what he really is saying. Because right now he is threatening war with Nigeria, saying that the Christians are under threat by Islamist terror, and that the U.S. might have to step in guns ablazing. But let's talk about what's really going on behind that religious Christianity smokescreen, okay? Because not even a week ago, Trump was threatening Venezuela. And you know what both of these countries have in common? Massive oil reserves. And just recently, Nigeria put a 15% tariff on imported petroleum, which means Western oil giants like Exxon, Chevron, and Shell can't just swoop in and dominate the market anymore. So now suddenly Christianity is in danger. Please. When he says Christianity, he does not mean freedom of religion. He means white Christian nationalism. The very same ideology that was weaponized and used to justify colonization, slavery, and invasion of Africa and the Americas under guise of missionary work. So let's be very clear. So this is not about saving Christians. This is about saving and maintaining Western control. It is quite literally about punishing Black and brown nations that dare to control their own resources. It's about keeping the global South under the thumb of white capitalist power and using religion as the moral excuse to justify doing it. Because if this was really about human rights and religious freedom, why is he not threatening action against countries where Muslims, Jews, and indigenous people are being threatened? Why just the oil-rich ones? So let's be very clear. Trump is not spreading faith. He's spreading white dominance. And Nigeria is just the next target on the altar of white Christian nationalism. White Christian imperialism has always been the game plan. They're simply using Christianity as their justifier the same way they always have. Don't fall for the okie doke.
Why Nigeria, if we may ask? Because it's the kill shot. The African's giant, the doorway to Sahel, is Nigeria. Zamfara, Bono, Jos Plateau. The jihadists tough sitting on the geological, these jihadists are sitting very tough in geological gold mine, which are gold, uranium, and rare earth material. Now, China got 80% of global market, but Nigeria untapped field could have changed the tech world forever. Now here sits Trump thinking like, oh, he's trying to play the Ukraine script again. Protect democracy, defend Christians. But it's not salvation. It's not salvation. It's strategy. Bases near Maiduguri. There's a place called Maiduguri. This is a perfect choke point to cut off the Alliance of Sahel. and back French chaos and block Russian and hijack African independence war. Now, the bigger picture here is crush BRICS, protect Western control, silence Pan-African dreams before they bloom, silence these militarily junta before they are very powerful. This is 2025 multipolar inferno, West versus BRICS, over tens of trillions of African vein. France bathes with bloods. Trump is always bathes with bombs. Act now or watch another Libya unravel. 200 million lives displaced. Europeans are swamped. Organization of African Sahel are rising again from ashes. But an African counterpunch is what? Is unity. The Alliance of African Sahel proved it that juntas must stand strong or stand tall with citizens. Nigeria, just don't sleep or you'll wake up one day in chain. As Ibrahim Traore once said, independence is under fire. So which side are you on?